aim of his prophethood? The aim was nothing more but allowing mankind to meditate and reflect on their existence, in order that after meditation and reflection, mankind not only had respect for themselves, but they had respect for other creations of God as well. That's it. We made our Prophet's religion complicated, whereas his mission from the beginning was a mission which was simple. Arabians were in Jahiliyyah. If any society is stagnant, it means it's a society which doesn't reflect. And when the human doesn't reflect, then he is the cause of a virus in his society. When the Prophet began his mission, did he begin by saying, all of you pray namaz right now? Did he say, all of you, Shahr Ramadan, fast, fast? All of you, keep a bed. All of you wear hijab. He began first by saying, mankind, reflect on your existence. Have an hour of reflection, it's greater than 70 years of dry worship. Today's Islam is too dogmatic. It is too focused on halal, haram, halal, haram, halal, haram, wajib, makruh, halal, haram. You're looking at them and you say, this is what Muhammad brought? No. The Prophet began his mission, and the first part of the mission was what? A true human is one who is reflecting on their role in this world. The moment they reflect, everything else will fall into place. Today's Muslims, we focus on the jigsaw pieces, we've forgotten the puzzle. Notice Miqdad, what does he say? He says, those early days in Islam, what were we doing? He says, in those early days in Islam, I heard the Prophet through, for example, one hadith saying, I heard the Prophet saying, an hour of reflection is greater than a year of worship. And then I heard Ibn Abbas say, the Prophet said, an hour of reflection is greater than 7 years of worship. Then I heard another companion say, an hour of reflection is greater than 70 years of worship. So I said, I'm going to go to the Prophet and ask him, how in one hadith are you telling the people an hour of reflection is greater than a year? In a second you're saying an hour of reflection is greater than 7 years of worship. In a third you're saying an hour of reflection is greater than 70 years of worship. When he told the Prophet said, Miqdad, come with me. Let's ask the first person. They asked the first person, how do you reflect? He said, I look at the creations of the heavens and the earth, and I think to myself, these cannot have come by an accident. The Prophet said, his 1 hour of reflection is greater than a year of worship. Then they went to the second. They said to him, how do you reflect? He replied by saying what? I think about the day of judgment and the questions I'm going to be asked about what I did in public, but what I did in private as well. Rasul said, his 1 hour of worship is greater than 7 years of, his 1 hour is greater than 7 years of worship. Then he went to the third. How do you reflect? The third said, I'm going to be very frank with you. I think about hellfire and I get scared. His 1 hour of reflection is greater than 70 years of worship. Because the moment you think about that, it will make you change your ways quite quickly. The origin of the religion was what? The Prophet began first by saying, 1 hour of reflection in this religion is greater than 70 years of dry worship. You can fast and pray and fast and pray and fast and pray. But if you fast for 30 days in the year, but the other 335, you're not reflecting on your life, on your role, on your meaning, on your objectives, then you haven't understood the true message of the religion of Islam. Then after that, the moment you reflect on your creation, that you were one day insignificant, you weren't worth mentioning, you came from something where if you look at it you are disgusted, then you'll look around those around you and you'll say, if I am so low, then why am I so arrogant to those who are around me? That's why when he began his mission, first at the age of 40 he asked people to reflect on their existence. Then he said, now that you've reflected, the first area I want you to remove is the area of racism in your society. Why? Because he knew when the human reflects, there'll never be a racist human being. Because what am I? Yes, because I'm a certain color, I'm better than another human. No, we were both sons of Adam, created from dust. You found that the first part of his biography was he spoke out against racism of any type. As in, how did Bilal come to Islam? Bilal came to Islam when one day he saw Ammar ibn Yasir was captured. When Ammar ibn Yasir was captured, the early aristocrats of Quraysh looked at Ammar and they said to Ammar, "Oh Ammar, are you the one who's trying to come forward? And you're trying to say that Muhammad's religion is the one we should follow?" Ammar said, "Yes." He said, "Explain to me Muhammad's religion." He replied by saying, "The Prophet talks of one God, and that God is one who is merciful to his creation. He has given them free will, and that God has a day of judgment where he will judge us, but he will not judge us on our race. He'll judge us on our consciousness of his presence." Bilal was standing there, he was a slave. At that moment, Bilal, one of the people said, "Bilal, torture Ammar." Bilal said, "No." He said, "What? Bilal, you black slave, torture Ammar." He said, "No." "How dare you, Bilal? We brought you up, torture." He said, "I have never heard of a message where there is a religion where a man with my skin complexion is protected, where a man of my skin complexion is honored." Notice here that Bilal, when he came towards Islam, it's because number one, there was the avenue of reflection by the Prophet. He allowed the religion to be intellectually spread, not emotionally. Intellectually there was a spread. When Bilal heard this, Bilal would later on, the Prophet would destroy any area of racism. How? He would come forward and say, when he reached Medina later on, the Prophet would come forward and say that I want someone to call for prayer. The people came forward and they said, "Who is it that you're going to call?" He said, "Bilal, go up and recite the adhan." In one step, he destroyed racism right from the beginning. Therefore, number one, racism, Rasulullah taught that is to be destroyed from the beginning of his message. Number two, not only do you respect people of different races, learn to respect people of different religions. Because in the early years of his prophethood, his companions were being tortured. So the Prophet came to Ja'far ibn Abu Talib, Ja'far the son of Abu Talib. He said to him, "Ja'far, go to Abyssinia, leave with the companions." Ja'far said to him, "Where shall we go and why?" He said, "Ja'far, go to Abyssinia because you will meet a Christian priest." Notice the message. On the first level, he wants to remove racism. You respect other humans. Then number two, respect people of other religions. If their principles are the same as ours, then they are closer to us than people of our religion who are hypocrites with our principles. Ja'far goes to Abyssinia and he meets the Christian priest. Amr ibn al-As is alongside Ja'far. When Ja'far comes, the Abyssinian priest says to Amr ibn al-As, "Who are these people?" Ja'far replies by saying what? He replies by saying, "We are people who believe in all the prophets and the final prophet of God, who spoke about Jesus, son of Mary." When the priest heard this, he said, "What does your book say about Jesus, son of Mary?" He said, "Our book says that Jesus, son of Mary, was born from a virgin birth, and a chapter is named after his mother, Maryam." This Abyssinian priest, the Prophet could have easily said, "But he's a Christian and they believe in crucifixion and we don't believe in crucifixion." No, he is a fellow believer in God and there is more in common between us than there are differences. Notice the attitude at the beginning of the religion. It wasn't an attitude like some Muslims today, where they don't look at another human being as a fellow member of humanity, rather they look at them as disbelievers. The early message was what? Number one, no racism. Number two, respect people of other religions, because those people have principles which we preach and understand. And that's why Ja'far, because of this, was allowed to stay in Abyssinia and build the early Muslim community in Africa. That was number two. Number three, in the early years in Mecca, he noticed, not only respect other humans, not only respect other religions, respect the other gender as human beings. Because these girls were being buried alive. The Prophet was noticing that these people had no morals. They were taking the girls and burying them alive. Even someone like Umar ibn al-Khattab himself narrates. Umar ibn al-Khattab narrates that in the days of Jahiliyyah, before Islam came, we used to bury our daughters alive. He says there are two things. One of them makes me cry and one of them makes me laugh. He said the one that makes me laugh is that we used to worship a god made out of dates. They made an idol made out of dates. You know dates which you eat? And he says we used to worship it, but when nobody's looking, we take a date and we eat it. By the end of worship, that god was dead. Then he says that used to make me laugh. Then he says there was an area which made me cry when I used to bury my daughter alive. He says my daughter held on to my beard as I was burying her. But I got the spade and I hit her and I buried her alive. Rasulullah, the Prophet, would notice, if I've come to this society, I first told them to reflect. They've begun to reflect. First, let them respect fellow nations and not be racist. Second, let them be tolerant of other religions. Thirdly, let them respect the role of the woman in society. Because if I give the rights to the woman, then we'll have great nations. Notice what he does. First, the woman is not to be buried alive. Second, the woman is to inherit and not be inherited. In the past, woman would be inherited. The Prophet comes and says, no, she has the right of inheritance. Number three, a dowry is to belong to the woman. In the days of Arabian Jahiliyyah, the dowry goes to the father of the girl, not the girl. When he came, he said the dowry goes to the girl herself. Number four, heaven lies underneath the feet of a woman. Heaven lies underneath the feet of the mother. When the Prophet, one day, a Jewish young man becomes Muslim, he comes to the Prophet. He says, "O Prophet of God, my mother is Jewish, but I am a Muslim. How do I treat her now that I've become a Muslim?" The Prophet said, "You treat her better than you used to treat her before." He went home, he started doing all the chores. His mother looked at him. She said, "Ever since you became a Muslim, you behave like this. Why?" He said, "My Prophet tells me heaven lies under your feet." She said, "If this is what the Prophet preaches, then I want to join the religion of this Prophet." That was then number four. Then number five, as part of his moral system, even his enemies would respect him, in the idea that many of them would keep their trusts with him. On the night that he left Mecca, 13 years he was in Mecca, 10 years he was in Medina. On the night that he left Mecca, he left Ali ibn Abi Talib behind to sleep in his bed. Was that the only role of Ali ibn Abi Talib? No. Ali ibn Abi Talib had a second role. "O Ali, after you have left my bed, the next day, return the trusts of my enemies that they entrusted with me." Imagine the enemies of Quraysh would say to the Prophet Muhammad, "We don't believe in you, we hate you, we think you're crazy. Do you mind looking after our gold necklace for us?" Because it was an ethical trait where even though the person is my enemy, I as a prophet of God have not come to make enemies. If I can show that I am trustworthy, let my enemies deposit with me. Therefore, after Mecca 13 years, he moved on to Medina. And the fifth important area when he left after 13 years, at the age of 53, when he went to Medina, when they fought him in his battles, many people would come and say, Muhammad spread his religion by the sword. Whereas the reality is those battles that occurred were defensive battles and they were not offensive. If they were offensive, then you could say that he spread the religion by the sword. Whereas on the contrary, they were what? They were defensive battles. Were they defensive battles to protect Muslims only? No. The Quran came forward in chapter 22, verse 39 to 40, saying what? Were it not for us telling our Prophet to come out and protect himself, there would not be a single church, synagogue or mosque in existence in Arabia. I ask you, if this Prophet came to spread his religion by the sword, why is the Quran talking